The vastness of space had always fascinated Commander Eli Taylor. He had spent years training to be part of humanity's first space exploration efforts, traveling to distant stars and discovering unknown planets. It was a dream he had cherished ever since he was a child, staring at the night sky, imagining what lay beyond. But nothing in his training prepared him for what happened that day. It began as a routine mission. Eli and his crew aboard the Genesis, a state-of-the-art exploratory ship, had been sent to the Viora system. This was a mission of discovery, one where they would explore new planets, study alien ecosystems, and maybe, just maybe, make contact with life beyond Earth. They had been in space for over a year, charting distant stars and mapping unexplored regions, but everything changed when they received a distress signal. It was faint, coming from the coordinates of an uncharted planet, Viora 7. The message was broken, difficult to understand. But one word stood out above all: help. Who would be on Viora? 7, sending a distress signal in such a way? Was it a fellow human? Or something else? He ordered his crew to change course, setting the Genesis on a direct path to the planet. The excitement of the unknown filled the air. This could be the first real encounter with alien life. The possibilities were endless. The Genesis descended into the atmosphere of Viora 7, a beautiful world with vast forests, towering mountains, and deep blue oceans. Despite its beauty, there was a heavy feeling in the air. The distress signal had come from a dense forest near the planet's northern pole. Eli's crew carefully maneuvered the ship down, scanning the area for any signs of life or wreckage. It didn't take long for their instruments to pick up the remains of an alien craft. Eli stood at the command center, his gaze fixed on the screen in front of him. The wreckage was scattered across the forest floor, broken into several large pieces. It looked like the ship had crashed, its once glowing hull now dull and battered. "Prepare for landing," Eli said, his voice calm but firm. The landing was smooth, and the crew quickly disembarked, following Eli as they made their way through the dense forest. The air was thick, humid, and the tall trees loomed above them. They couldn't see far ahead, but the wreckage was still visible in the distance. As they approached the site, Eli could see movement among the wreckage. He raised his hand, signaling for the crew to stop. They all froze, their eyes scanning the surroundings. Then, a figure emerged from behind the wreckage. A woman, but not like any woman Eli had ever seen. She was tall, standing over 6 feet, with skin that shimmered faintly like polished silver. Her eyes were a deep shade of violet, glowing softly in the dim light of the forest. Her hair, long and flowing, seemed to shift color as it caught the light, a mix of deep blue and purple. She wore a suit of armor, sleek and silver, designed with intricate patterns that seemed both alien and advanced. Despite the heavy armor, she moved with grace, like she was used to it, almost as if it were an extension of herself. Eli's heart raced. This was it. This was an alien, a being from beyond the stars, the discovery of a lifetime. But the excitement quickly turned to concern as he noticed the woman stagger, her legs giving way as she collapsed onto the ground. "Hey!" Eli shouted, rushing forward. His crew followed close behind. "Are you okay?" The woman didn't respond immediately. She lay there, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The armor she wore was damaged, and Eli could see blood seeping from underneath. It was clear she was badly hurt. Without thinking, Eli knelt beside her, removing his helmet to get closer. "We need to get you help," he said softly, his voice filled with urgency. The woman slowly lifted her head, her eyes locking with his. There was a look of recognition in them, a strange understanding that made Eli's breath catch. Her lips parted, and she spoke in a language that was completely foreign to him. I need help," she whispered, her voice weak, yet there was a strange strength behind it. Her words were broken, but the message was clear. "We'll help you," Eli said, speaking slowly to make sure she understood. "We're here to help." With the help of his crew, Eli carefully lifted the woman and carried her back to the ship. They placed her in the medical bay, and Eli worked quickly, trying to stabilize her. The medical equipment aboard the Genesis was top-notch, but this was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The woman's biology was vastly different from humans. Her blood, her organs, everything was foreign. As Eli worked, he couldn't help but watch her. There was something about her that fascinated him. Something in the way she carried herself, even in her weakened state. She was a princess, he realized. He wasn't sure how he knew, but it was clear in the way she held herself, even when vulnerable. She wasn't just some alien, some random being. She was important. And that thought filled him with a deep sense of responsibility. When she finally regained consciousness, she looked at him with those violet eyes, her gaze intense. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice stronger now, though still strained. "My name is Eli Taylor," he answered. "I'm a commander with the United Earth Fleet. We're here to help you." She seemed to process his words for a moment, before her eyes softened. "I am Virael," she said, "Princess of the Viora system." Eli's mind raced as he took in her words. She was a princess, a royal from an entirely different galaxy. This was more than just a discovery. This was history in the making. "Virael," he repeated her name, testing the sound of it. "What happened to you? How did you end up here?" Her eyes flickered with something like fear. "Our world was destroyed," she said. "My people are scattered. I was sent here to seek help, but the ship was damaged. I don't know if I will make it back." Her words were filled with sorrow, and Eli's heart went out to her. He couldn't imagine what it must feel like to be the last of your people, to be so far from home. He had to help her. He didn't know how, but he knew he couldn't leave her stranded here. "I'll help you," Eli said firmly, his voice filled with determination. "You're not alone. We'll find a way to get you back home." The princess looked at him with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "Don't be ashamed," she whispered. "Help me, human." Her words struck him deeply, more than he had expected. She wasn't ashamed of needing help. She was asking for something more, something that went beyond survival. She was asking for hope. And for the first time in his life, Eli realized that he wasn't just helping her out of duty or curiosity. He was helping her because he couldn't stand the thought of letting her face this alone. As the days passed, Eli found himself spending more time with Virael. He worked to treat her injuries, learning more about her and her people. Virael was a strong leader, a woman of remarkable intelligence and grace. Despite her injuries, she never lost her sense of purpose. She was a princess, yes, but she was also a warrior, a survivor. And Eli was beginning to see her not just as an alien, but as someone who was fighting for the survival of her people. Her struggles, her strength, and her vulnerability began to change something within him. He wasn't just a commander now. He was a human, someone who was willing to stand by her side, no matter the cost. The days on Viora. 7 passed slowly, but they were filled with new discoveries and new connections. Eli and Virael shared their stories, their hopes, and their dreams, and in doing so, they discovered something neither of them had expected, an unspoken bond that crossed the stars. Eli didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. This encounter would change the course of his life. The meeting of human and alien, of commander and princess, was just the beginning of something much bigger, something that would define not just their futures, but the future of their entire galaxy. The days following the crash were some of the most challenging and unexpected that Commander Eli Taylor had ever faced. Virael, the alien princess he had rescued, was recovering quickly, but not without difficulty. She had a powerful resilience that Eli admired, even though her injuries were severe. The medical bay aboard the Genesis had state-of-the-art equipment, but the difference in biology between humans and Virail made the healing process complex. Eli often found himself working late into the night, studying alien medical texts and trying different treatments, trying to stabilize her injuries. Yet, in the back of his mind, a larger question remained unanswered. What was Virail really like beneath her alien armor? Her armor was like nothing Eli had ever seen. Sleek and shiny, it seemed almost organic in its design, flowing across her body like liquid metal. It was a protective shell, but Eli knew it wasn't just a suit for battle. The patterns etched into the surface of the armor hinted at something more, something sacred. It was as if the armor was part of her identity, and yet, every time Eli had attempted to ask her about it, Virail would remain tight-lipped. There was an air of mystery surrounding the armor that she wore, and it intrigued Eli more than anything else. One evening, as Eli was reviewing some data from the ship's diagnostic systems, he received a message from the medical bay. Virail had regained consciousness, but this time, there was something different in her demeanor. She wasn't just the alien princess in need of help anymore. There was a new layer to her. The vulnerability she had shown when they first met seemed to have faded, replaced by a quiet strength. Eli immediately left the command center and made his way to the medical bay. As he entered, he found her sitting up in the bed, her back straight, and her eyes fixed on the view outside the small window. She was looking out at the stars, her face illuminated by the faint glow of distant galaxies. Eli hesitated for a moment, but then stepped forward. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. Virail turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, followed by something else. Relief? Gratitude? It was hard to tell. She smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I am recovering," she said, her voice still a little weak but stronger than before. "I should be able to move soon." Eli nodded, glancing at the bed where the remnants of her armor lay. The intricate designs were now visible, no longer hidden beneath the smooth, reflective surface. Eli had seen her in the armor before, but now, without it, she was exposed in a way that was almost unsettling. Her skin was a pale shade of lavender, shimmering faintly like the twilight sky. Her body was lean and strong, but there was a softness to her, a fragile quality that Eli had not noticed when she was wearing her armor. Virail noticed his gaze and shifted slightly, as though uncomfortable. "I know you have questions," she said, her tone more serious now. "About me, about the armor. But there are things that cannot be explained so easily." Ellie stood there for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't sure what to say, but the curiosity inside him was growing stronger. "I don't mean to pry," he said finally, "but I've never seen anything like your armor. It's AD, different from anything humans have." Virail's eyes seemed to darken for a moment, her gaze drifting away from him. She was silent for a long while, as if weighing her words. Eli waited, sensing that this was not just a simple matter of explaining technology or culture. There was something more here, a deeper story. At last, she spoke again. "This armor," she began, "is not merely protection. It is a symbol of who I am, of what I was born into. It represents my people, my lineage, my responsibility. Without it, I am not the same." Allie's brow furrowed as he listened. "What do you mean by that?" he asked gently. Virail's gaze softened, and she leaned back against the pillows, her fingers lightly tracing the edges of the blanket. "I was born into a royal family, but my people, my world, has been at war for centuries. My ancestors created the armor as a way to ensure our survival. It is made from the strongest material we have, capable of withstanding the most brutal forces. But it is not just a tool for battle. It is our legacy. Our armor binds us to our past, and our future. She paused, and Eli could sense the weight of the words she spoke. When I wear it, I am not just a princess. I am a leader, a protector, the last hope for my people. But without it, I am nothing. Eli felt a pang of sympathy for her. He had known the weight of responsibility in his own life, but this was something entirely different. Verael was not just a ruler. She was the last of her kind, the final link in a chain that had been broken by war and destruction. She carried the hopes of an entire species on her shoulders, and she had been forced to flee her homeworld to survive. "What happened to your people?" Eli asked, his voice filled with quiet concern. Verael's eyes darkened again, and her expression grew distant. "A civil war," she said softly. "Our people were once united, but greed and power tore us apart. My father tried to maintain peace, but he was betrayed. And now, my people are scattered across the galaxy, hunted by those who want to see us destroyed. I am the last of the royal line. If I fall, there will be no one left to fight for my people." Eli's heart ached for her. He had never imagined that the princess he had found on this distant planet was carrying such a heavy burden. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a beacon of hope for an entire civilization. But even with all her strength, she was still just one person. And Eli realized that he couldn't let her face this alone. "You're not alone, Verael," Eli said quietly, taking a step closer to her. "You have us." "You have me." She looked at him then, her eyes searching his face as if weighing his words. For a moment, Eli thought she might say something more, but instead, she nodded. "I appreciate your help, human," she said softly, "but this is my fight, and I cannot ask you to carry it for me." "I'm not offering to carry it for you," Eli replied, meeting her gaze with determination. "But I will stand beside you, whatever comes next." For the first time since their meeting, Verael smiled. It was a small, fleeting smile, but it was enough to show Eli that she had begun to trust him in a way that went beyond the simple need for survival. There was something deeper forming between them, something that neither of them had expected. Later that evening, as Eli prepared to leave the medical bay, Verael called to him. "Eli," she said, her voice almost hesitant, "before you go, there is something else I must show you. Something that is part of the armor. Something that may help us understand what is to come." Ellie turned to face her. Curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Without another word, Verael gestured to the pieces of her armor that lay across the bed. As Eli stepped closer, she reached for one of the pieces, a gauntlet, and placed it in his hands. It felt heavier than it looked, its surface cool and smooth. There were intricate symbols etched into the metal, symbols that seemed to shift and change as Eli moved the gauntlet in his hands. "This armor," Verael said, her voice soft but filled with an underlying strength, "has a mind of its own. It can bond with its wearer, drawing power from them and, in turn, offering protection. But it is not just a weapon. It is a living thing, and only those who are truly worthy can unlock its full potential." Eli studied the gauntlet in his hands, trying to understand the meaning behind her words. "And you? You're the only one who can unlock it?" Verael nodded. "Yes. My people were the only ones who knew how to forge the armor, how to bond with it. And now I must find a way to rebuild my people, to restore what was lost." Eli placed the gauntlet back on the bed, his mind spinning with the implications of what she had told him. The armor was more than just a tool. It was a part of her, a symbol of everything she had lost and everything she hoped to rebuild. And somehow Eli knew that his journey with Verael was far from over. They were bound together now, not just by the circumstances of their meeting, but by a shared sense of purpose. "You're not alone, Verael," Eli repeated, his voice firm. "I'll help you rebuild, whatever it takes." And in that moment, Virael knew that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't facing the future alone. The days following their conversation were filled with preparation and anticipation, the distress signal that had brought them to Viora. 7 had been a sign of something much bigger. Eli could feel the weight of what was happening settling on his shoulders. But he also felt a sense of determination. He had been drawn into something far beyond the typical duties of a commander. He had been drawn into a struggle for survival and hope, one that could change the course of history. Virael, the princess of the Viora system, had trusted him with a glimpse into her past, her people, and the immense burden she carried. And now, as strange as it seemed, he had taken it on as his own. The Genesis was not just a ship anymore. It had become their sanctuary, their base of operations. Eli had transformed the ship's command center into a strategic hub, carefully planning their next steps. The rest of the crew had been briefed on the situation, though they still didn't fully understand what Virael's survival meant. All they knew was that they had a duty to protect her and help her find a way home. Virael spent most of her time in the medical bay, recovering and training, though she was still healing from her injuries. Her mind never rested. Every moment she was thinking of her people, where they were, how they could be found, and how she could lead them back to safety. She knew the battle that lay ahead would not be won through force alone. It would require strategy, trust, and the strength to face the unknown. One evening, as the sun set and the stars began to shine through the ship's observation windows, Virael sat quietly in a corner of the medical bay. Her armor, which had been carefully repaired, lay next to her on a table. She had not worn it since she had arrived on the Genesis. It was a constant reminder of everything she had lost. It represented her homeworld, her family, and her people. It was also a reminder of the war she had been forced to flee. Yet for all its power, the armor could not heal the pain of her past, and for all its protection, it had failed her when she needed it most. Eli entered the room quietly, careful not to disturb her thoughts. He had been working with the crew, making sure the ship was ready for the journey ahead, but his mind had been on Virael, on her journey, and on the shared responsibility they now carried. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of future they were heading toward. "Virael?" he said softly, his voice gentle as he approached her. She looked up at him, her violet eyes meeting his with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something Eli couldn't quite place. "I've been thinking about our next steps," Eli continued. "We can't just sit here. We need to find a way to get you home, to bring your people back together, but we also need to be prepared for what's coming. I don't know what kind of forces we'll be up against, but I do know one thing. We need to work together. You, me, and everyone on this ship. We're stronger when we stand united." Virael nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the weight of his words. "I've never been able to do this alone," she said quietly. "My people have always fought their battles on their own. But we cannot afford to be divided any longer. I need your help, Eli. And I am willing to give everything I have to make sure my people are safe." Her words hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't just asking for help. She was trusting him with the future of her entire race. Eli didn't know if he was ready for such a responsibility. But he did know one thing for sure. He couldn't let her face this alone. They were in this together, no matter what. The following days were spent gathering intelligence, making plans, and preparing for the inevitable. They didn't know exactly where Virael's people were, but they had a starting point. The coordinates she had provided led them to a distant sector of the galaxy, one that was considered dangerous and largely unexplored. It was home to ancient ruins, hostile forces, and remnants of the Viora civilization. But it was also the only lead they had. Eli spent hours in the command center, reviewing the star maps and analyzing the data they had collected. The crew worked alongside him, each person contributing to the effort in their own way. But it was clear that their resources were limited. They would have to rely on their wits, their skills, and their courage if they hoped to succeed. Virael, meanwhile, spent her time training. Even though her injuries were still healing, she couldn't afford to wait. She knew that when the time came, she would need to be ready, not just physically, but mentally. She couldn't be the leader her people needed if she wasn't prepared to face whatever lay ahead. And Eli was right. She needed help. She couldn't do it alone. In the days that followed, Eli and Virael spent more time together, discussing strategies, sharing their thoughts, and learning from each other. The more they spoke, the more they began to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Eli learned about the Viora people's history, their culture, and their struggles. Virael, in turn, learned about Earth's history, its battles, its triumphs, and its lessons. It became clear that despite the vast differences in their backgrounds, they shared many of the same values: a desire for peace, the strength to fight for what was right, and a deep sense of responsibility for those they cared about. It was this shared understanding that began to form a bond between them. A bond that went beyond duty and necessity. They were becoming allies, partners in a mission that neither of them could complete alone. The night before they were set to leave for the unknown sector of the galaxy, Eli stood in the observation deck of the Genesis, looking out at the stars. He had always been fascinated by space, but now it felt different. It wasn't just about exploration anymore. It was about survival. It was about hope. Virael joined him, her footsteps soft on the metal floor. She stood beside him, gazing out at the vastness of space. For a long time, neither of them spoke. There was nothing that needed to be said. They both understood the weight of what was to come. "We're ready," Eli said at last, breaking the silence. "Tomorrow, we take the first step." Virael turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "And whatever happens, we face it together." Eli nodded. Together. The next day, the Genesis launched from Viora 7, its engines roaring to life as it moved toward the unknown. As they left the planet behind, Eli felt a sense of resolve settle over him. This was no longer just about a mission. It was about finding hope in the face of overwhelming odds. It was about standing by someone who needed him, not as a commander, but as a human being who understood the power of unity and the importance of fighting for what was right. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be battles, hardships, and challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But Eli knew one thing for certain: they were not alone. Together, he and Virael had the power to change the course of their future, and as they hurtled toward the unknown, Eli couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning of something much larger. The galaxy was vast, and their journey was far from over. But with each step they took, they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future, one that they would shape together.